Welcome to a Women's Ministry Book Club, and thank you for joining us as we study the story of Ruth, 12 Moments in Every Woman's Life. This presentation is made available by Community Baptist Church Women's Ministry, where Reverend Eric Magwood is our pastor and Evangelist Ernestine Magwood is our ministry president. You may need to have pen and paper ready for notes taking. Let's begin. The book is written by Joan Chittister, with art illustrations by John August Swanson, and is based on the book of Ruth in the Bible. The purpose of the book is to help us better understand what it means to be a woman of God, and to live under the impulse of the Holy Spirit in our everyday lives, and to be a creative part of God's creative power. The PowerPoint series were developed through the curriculum development activities of the Church Health Center of Faith Community Ministries in Memphis, Tennessee. The beauty of the illustrations in the book made the story even more appealing. Each panel represents a chapter in the book. What Swanson did was unify the 12 panels in 3 rows of 4, with the panels in each row having the same horizontal line. The first row is connected by the hills in the background, the second row by the barley fields, and the third row by the architectural arches. Arranging the panels in this way gave a more complete narrative of the story than if they had relied on only one large panel. In our book, Ruth and Naomi are simply metaphors, models of all women who go through trying moments in life, both momentous and mundane. However, this is not only a woman's book, and neither is this series. The artist hopes men will see it as an opportunity to grow in awareness and sensitivity toward the women in their lives. The story of Ruth and Naomi began in Moab. The nation of Moab came about when Lot, Abraham's nephew, impregnated his oldest daughter, and she gave birth to a son whom she named Moab. Abraham, being the forefather of Israel and the uncle of Lot, made the Moabites and the Israelites cousins. However, the Israelites encountered opposition from Balak, who was king of the Moabites, and for 18 years Moab oppressed Israel. Now, because of Moab's idol worshipping and its constant opposition to Israel, God cursed Moab and forbade intermarriage between the two nations. Ruth 1, verses 1 through 5. Now it came to pass, in the days when the judges ruled, that there was a famine in the land. And a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to dwell in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, the name of his wife was Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. Then Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left and her 2 sons. Now they took wives of the women of Moab. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth, and they dwelt there about 10 years. Then both Mahlon and Chilion also died. So the woman survived her 2 sons and her husband. The story of Ruth and Naomi is a universal story of the poor, the marginalized, and the refugee. It's a story from which all of us can learn about the human family, as well as our own individual families, regardless of where we're situated around the world. The story is centered around a private family rather than on national or kingdom affairs. The plot revolves around family relationships. In those days, parents did not just name their children for the sake of doing so. Each name had a specific meaning, and most were highly symbolic. For instance, Elimelech means, "My God is king." Mahlon, sickness or weakness. Chilion, spent. Orpah, back of neck or stiff neck. Naomi, pleasant, Later she changed her name to Mara, meaning bitterness. Ruth means friend or companion, and Boaz means in him is strength. The central theme of the book is the tale of a Gentile woman who became an important ancestress of David. However, the storyteller's purpose was not the theological one, nor was it written to highlight the lineage of David. The main theme of the book is chesed, which is Hebrew for loyalty or faithfulness. The story is set in rabbinic tradition, and as we go along, we'll see that all three main characters, Naomi, Ruth, Boaz, all manifested acts of chesed or loyalty. We'll also see that family continuity motivated all the main characters and is present in all acts of loyalty. Here we see also that the family is preserved not by wives of patriarchs, but by an elderly woman and her Gentile daughter-in-law. However, the issue becomes, how did these women survive? Considering everything they were facing, how did they survive? For them, as well as for us, life is made up of a series of defining moments, such as loss, risk, sickness, change, transformation, decisions we have to make, survival. How we deal with each of these moments determine who and what we really are, and who and what we can become both spiritually and socially. The story as told is a simple one. Two women, one old, one young, both childless and vulnerable, both marginal to their social systems, both had limited resources, and both in deep pain at the loss of their husbands. It is a familiar situation for many women today who find themselves left to survive in a system to which they do not have full access to what they truly need. Ruth and Orpah were faced with a major decision: to cling to what they were, who they were, or to become new women in a new world. To go with Naomi meant stepping way outside the cultural and traditional norm for them. They could stay with the old pattern in their own country, of course, or they could seize this moment in life to make something new of themselves. Naomi's husband, Elimelech, died. 10 years later, both sons died. Naomi was left in a foreign land, a refugee who had migrated earlier to escape famine in her own country. She had no blood relatives in Moab, so essentially, she was alone. Naomi had to weigh her odds. The open road was risky for a woman alone, but to stay in Moab meant destitution and/or starvation. To travel from Moab to Judah was not an easy one, as you can see on the map, especially with the Dead Sea separating a direct route between the two regions. And in biblical times, for a woman to be alone without the protection of a man is to be in danger, socially, economically, and physically. Still, Naomi decided to return to Bethlehem on the hope of finding a next of kin still there, because Hebrew law made provisions for the care of widows and orphans by the next of kin. One daughter-in-law, the sensible one, many would say, decided to stay in Moab. She would likely remarry and go on as usual. For her, that was the safe and sensible choice to make. Ruth, on the other hand, decided to go to a land where Moabites were met with prejudice, where interracial marriages were frowned upon, and where men could have multiple wives. Still, Ruth decided to give up home, country, familiar customs and traditions, and the opportunity for remarriage, all for an elderly woman she loved. That was chesed in action, loyalty in action. So now, considering the choice that Ruth made, I have a question for you. Can you think of a woman, any woman, who has not been faced with the question of what it would mean for her to strike out on a different course of action, a different path than the one defined for her by time, circumstances, and or society? Can you? Bear in mind that the implications for doing so by a single woman, or widowed or divorced, is far more different than for a single man, whether he is divorced or widowed. For one thing, it may prove to be dangerous for her physically. Take a moment to think about the question, write your answer down, and I'll be waiting for you. The story is about three women left to fend for themselves in a world geared to the autonomy and ability of men, but not to the freedom and the full development of women. For these three, and for all of us, it becomes a defining moment after which we are never quite the same again. For women, moments such as these are quite often intensely private and deeply personal ones. However, these three women became models in the midst of their struggles, in the qualities they discovered in themselves, and in the decisions it required for them to move on. True for men and women, we weave our way through the complexities of life trying to find a balance between our values and our own experiences and wisdom. There is, however, a uniqueness to a woman's life. We live in two worlds, one public, one private, and oftentimes we find ourselves standing on the edge of two worlds, one foot in each of them. The woman called by God, either by life circumstances or by personal gift, to live in both worlds, public and private, knows the expense to the self of following the call. Many women carry responsibilities far beyond the strength of the average person to bear. We care for small children, we look after elderly relatives, we maintain busy homes, we work an 8-hour job, sometimes more, and we manage the greater part of the housework, or in some cases, all of it, and all the while trying to become whole persons, pursuing the development of our own potential, dreaming our own dreams, and looking for spiritual models to show us the way. Here is where the story of Ruth and Naomi begins to matter. Chittister wrote, "Sometimes, as life is lived on the edge of two worlds, the world crumbles. Divorce comes, premature death, job or career ends, money runs out, a flood comes and wipes away everything, and the list goes on. Still, through it all, we must carry on as Ruth and Naomi did." The story in our book takes a position on women and defies social tradition then and now. It calls us beyond stereotypes and social barriers to fullness of life and wholeness of being, even as the eternal debate continues over God's will for women versus His will for men. So, considering the eternal debate about God's will for women, here are some questions for you to consider until we meet again. And yes, you're getting homework. To make it interesting, have a discussion about the questions with your family and friends. The questions are: how do you perceive this eternal debate about God's will for women? Do you think God's will for women is different from His will for men? Why or why not? What attitudes and societal circumstances do you think fuel this debate? Could it be based on gender roles, cultural traditions, and or the male as the breadwinner, etc.? Have fun with it. Have an enjoyable discussion. And always keep the Word of God in mind. In summary, the book we're studying is a discourse on the spirituality of women. We can think of these women in terms of being refugees, of being vulnerable to their social systems. There are a series of defining moments in every person's life. Women deal with these moments in ways different from men. The characters in our story, Ruth and Naomi, represent spiritual models to us of loyalty, of faithfulness. Next time, we'll discuss grief, loss, tragedy, wounding, helplessness, and the transforming potential that lies within each of us. As we progress through this series, I pray you will get a better understanding of who or what God is calling you to be and or to do. Come on back.